Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. And this is the Facebook Live show that is trying desperately to make the world safe for ADHDers. I am a neuropsychologist in private practice. I spend at least half of my week, maybe more, working with ADHD families, children, adults, all of that, parents, spouses, the whole shooting match. Plus, I am the father of an ADHD child, and we started this journey way back before we knew very much of anything. I mean, before anybody knew much of anything about ADHD and what was the cause, if it was a real thing even, what was the best treatment. We had questions about all of that. And now we're starting to have some answers. And that makes life a lot easier. But still, a lot of people are still living with the same sort of fears and anxieties that were around back when I was just starting out as a father. So most of that you could give up, but you need to do the work. You need to do the research. You need to do the reading. And I don't mean the most scary thing you can find on Facebook or on the internet, because there are tons of scary stories about treatments that went wrong and, horrible things happened because of this and because of that. By and large, ADHD is thoroughly treatable. The medications are safe. There's no particular long-standing side effects that cause lifetime complications. I mean, none of the horror stories are true, are based on people's observations. One of the biggest problems we have is that you can't be for sure that a kid that's being called ADHD is actually ADHD. You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing do the evaluation. And 10 minutes in your doctor's office filling out an 18 or 27 symptom checklist is not a thorough evaluation, okay? If you look at the symptoms of ADHD, the ones that are in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the APA, the book that most mental health people use, you can see that there are things that all of us have experienced. We've all been disorganized. We've all failed to pay attention. We've all zipped around instead of paying attention to a lecture or a business meeting or something like that. I mean, if you look at pretty much all of those symptoms, they're not that unusual, and they makes the diagnosis tricky. I mean, you've got to, like I say, you've got to have somebody who knows what they're doing and who's done a bunch of these and knows what they're talking about. That's sort of off topic. Oh, and I also need to tell you I'm a little bit late today. We had a little bit of technical problems. I'm not sure what's going on, but all of a sudden, sometimes Facebook Live is keeping the shot on a vertical when it's supposed to be a horizontal. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, just ignore it, but just understand that unless you like to look at your phone or your iPad or whatever you're watching this on lying down, it wouldn't be very comfortable for you. Okay, but anyway, so we were fighting it out with that. Matter of fact, one of my friends, one of the people I know who's really an experienced internet marketer, he did a whole presentation with his picture tilted, this way, going this way instead of this way. So it happens, but we've wasted a lot of time trying to get started and not being able to get the orientation correct. Now we're good to go, I think, but I want to do what I hope to God is my final back to school thing. And this is kind of the big one when I think about it. I know mostly what I've emphasized up till now is get the routines back to where they're supposed to be for going to school. Get the sleep schedule where it is supposed to be. Get the mealtime stuff where it's supposed to be. Get their medications on board and adjusted and all that sort of thing. And make sure that the places where studying is going to be and homework is going to be done are set up and decluttered and all that kind of stuff. And next week, for most of you, is when you start your kids back to school. You start that whole thing over again. And this is the tricky weekend, really, for parents, because you've got to be optimistic, or at least present optimism when you're talking to your kids. I mean, you don't want to be inauthentic, if you will, but you can't be saying, oh, Lord, this is going to be terrible. Oh, this is going to be awful. Oh, I hope it doesn't happen like it happened last year. Dip-de-dip-de-dip. Your child, all children, but probably more ADHD kids, they read you. They read your emotions. They read how you're really feeling, and they respond to it. And we don't talk about this a lot, but people connect emotionally before they connect intellectually. It's because of the way your brain is structured, and I don't need to go into any great detail about that. But just to suffice to say that the part of your brain that reads emotions is an open system. Okay, so it's always out there looking around. I suppose originally it was to look for danger or something, but now it's around checking the emotional environment that you're in. You know, if you walk in, and I know we've all had the experience, and we may not exactly have paid too much attention to it, but you walk into, say, a small business, and you can tell right away that something is bad wrong. And you're not even, it may be the first time you've ever been there, you don't know these people from Adam, you haven't been doing regular business with them, but you go in there and you know, whoa, what in the world is going on here? Why do I feel really uncomfortable? And it's because your limbic lobe, the part of your brain that's reading the emotions and responding to the emotions, is picking up that there is something really negative going on in this environment. The same way, and on a happier note, if you go into some kind of a meeting and people are laughing and joking and all that stuff, and you find your emotion picks up. And that's, again, is that part of your brain that reads emotions picking up on, hey, this is a fun place to be, kind of thing. Of course, when you have to get some work done and they're still doing it 30 minutes later and you feel like you're just wasting your time, that's a whole different thing. But your child can read your emotions, is what I'm getting at. And you need to authentically believe that this school year is going to be helpful and hopefully will be the turnaround year for you. Will be the year that it seems like everything clicks in. And I've talked about how if you look at an ADHDer through their whole academic career, there are peaks and valleys. Okay, you need to recognize the peaks and then start looking at and evaluating what was the reason for that to be a really good year. And sometimes it's as simple as being the teacher. And I don't mean that in any kind of a negative way, but I mean we underpay educators tremendously, but yet we are increasingly dependent on an educated population. And the importance of a good teacher, and especially we talked before when you were doing your 504, and that you have some voice in what teacher your child gets. And the smart thing to do is to get some information about what teachers seem to do really well with ADHD kids. And that's, unless there's a real active ADHD community in your area, you probably don't get to interact with a whole bunch of parents, but you should as much as you can and find out, what teachers seem to work really well with ADHD kids, because a lot of it is based on the teacher. If the teacher is interesting and active and lively, but it is easily able to organize things and doesn't get all freaked out if there's a disruption, that's the teacher you want. The ones you don't want are the ones that freak out and start issuing orders like a drill sergeant. That's the kind of teacher your child reacts negatively to. So you don't want to spend a lot of time fighting it out because the teacher isn't comfortable with ADHD kids. And that's as simple and as complicated as it needs to be. Okay? If you've got a good teacher, the year will be better. If you've got your routines set up, the year will be better. And one of the things you need to really be concentrating on is, why are we doing all this? I mean, that is, and a lot of times we don't tell kids why it's important for them to learn math, say, or why it's important for them to learn science, or what's the big deal about learning phonics, and what's the big deal about learning to read, and all that sort of thing. And we really should. A lot of the more advanced school systems in the world are doing their learning based on getting kids involved in projects. And then the demand comes up. If you are trying to build a workshop, an exterior workshop, and you need to figure out how to do the roof, what pitch is required, how you make the cuts in the rafters, all that sort of thing. You get them involved in that kind of a situation, they'll figure out geometry, okay? And they will be motivated to learn about it, So why we don't do it that way, instead of teaching us geometry? Well, I know the way I was taught geometry. I know the way I was taught all of my math. And I've had calculus and statistics. And statistics was easier because it's real easy to figure out what you're going to be doing with statistics, especially if you're in grad school in psychology. But even if you're not, statistics are around us all the time. But things like geometry and algebra are a lot more subtle and a lot less obvious. So you've got to let your kid in on the why. Why are we doing all this? What's the purpose? And part of it is, education prepares you for life, ideally, okay? And what you need to be doing as a parent is constantly reminding them of why stuff is important. We don't do well when we don't have a good reason for doing things. None of us do, And ADHD kids particularly have this interest-based attention system, what Dodson calls an interest-based attention system. If they're interested in it, they can pay attention like crazy and do extremely well doing whatever job you need to have done. But if they aren't interested, they have a terrible time. Okay? And the why. Why do I need to be doing this? What's important about doing this? That is the thing that helps increase their interest in doing certain tasks, in doing school at all, in doing math at all, in doing science at all, is that there's got to be a reason for this stuff. Why do I have to do this? How will it help me in life? I mean, I'm constantly, I evaluate children all the way, from age 6 up. And you always get, when they're about 12 years old, and you know how that happens to everybody when they're 12 years old, is they start believing they know everything. They're big people now. They've matured. But I'm always hearing, what do I need algebra for? For God crying out loud. I never use that stuff. Guess what their teachers aren't doing? Teachers are teaching procedures, not the reason for the procedure. So if they're not doing it, you better do it. You better know a reason. Why do I need to know this? And geometry is a little easier to justify. I mean, there isn't a carpenter on the planet who doesn't use tons of geometry. I mean, they may not be aware that they're using geometry, but they are. You don't put a roof on a house without knowing geometry. And you can't build sidewalls without knowing something about geometry. And there are, if you're carpenters, just say, you're building a house, you need to know geometry. You need to know basic math and measurements and that sort of thing for sure. You need to know something about physics, like what's it take to hold up a roof? What's it take to hold a wall together? What's it take to hold the whole house together? Those are all things, but you can figure out if you've got the mathematical and a little bit of physics knowledge. But very rarely do you see that presented in a school lesson. I mean, I know I never got that. We were just, this is what I want you to do. Do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you will get the correct answer. That was the way it was taught. And I, being a dutiful young man who was afraid to fail, so I learned geometry that way. And it didn't hurt me, but it would have been a heck of a lot easier if I understood why geometry, why is that on this curriculum? Why do they want me to know that? What's so important about that? And it's like any other subject. History. Why is history important? Why do I need to know this stuff? Why do I, Well, look at what happens to us as a country if we don't recognize the mistakes of the past, the things that went wrong, the things that caused problems in the past. We're just doomed to repeat them. And when we repeat them, sometimes it gets worse than it was the first time. And I'm definitely not going to go into the current politics, but I would just say that it has become much nastier than it was when I was a kid. Just say that and leave it at that. But much of it is because we have a whole population that doesn't really have any knowledge of history, history. Okay, history. That you, there's pretty much no human behavior that hasn't been done before. And in groups, there are nothing that one group has tried to do to another group that hasn't been done before. So it's all there for us to learn, for us to recognize what happens and what the ingredients are that make stuff happen. So that's why it's important. And that's why you, the parent, need to provide the why to your child. Hey, man, this is great. You're going to learn this year. And don't be phony. I mean, because ADHDers are great at detecting phoniness. It's kind of like an inborn sense. And so you can't be phony about it, but there are legitimate reasons why all this stuff is in the school curriculum. And it's not very well explained, I think. So you better, let them know why this is important. And a lot of times, dinner time conversations can lead support to that. I know pretty much every prominent family in my lifetime, when they've done interviews, frequently what would happen at the dinner table with, say, the Kennedys, is that was the time to discuss what was going on in the world, and what people thought about different things, what the children thought about different things, and what the parents thought about different things. And I think that's ideal. I mean, basically, that's your behavior and reinforces what the school is trying to teach your child, and that's what you want. If you're teaching them that school crap, it's just something you gotta go through, then you get to figure out what you really want to do. Well, good luck with that one. You're going to have a lot of trouble. You'll have a lot more trouble with your child than you would if you believe and understand why the school system, why the curriculum is set up the way it is. Not necessarily the teaching method they use, because that's always subject to debate, but the idea that an educated population is important. I know I'm just quoting somebody there, but I can't remember for the life of me who it is, but is vital for a government, for a country to live and be successful and so on. So that's it. That's your job. You're trying to show them the reason, give them the interest, tell them the why. And I think I'm quoting here a guy, I just got exposed to some of his stuff. He did a TEDx talk, and he was talking mostly about companies and that sort of stuff. And he said that the companies that are successful, like Apple and that sort of thing, it's because everybody knows the why, and the why is more important than the how and the what. And so his idea was that companies that have a really strong why, a really strong persona kind of thing, like Apple does, Apple is in the business of making the world more convenient and easier for people to use, and then Apple junkies are noticeably devoted fans of the product. So anyway, but the same thing applies to almost any endeavor in life. You need to know the why. You need to have a reason. You need to have a good, strong why. And your child needs a good, strong why, especially if he's an ADHDer. Because ADHDers aren't necessarily compliant just because they're told they have to. Matter of fact, that's a good way to set yourself up for a battle. But if they can figure out the interest, the reason to be interested in something, they are way more likely to do well. Okay, that is me for this week. And like I say, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. And we're trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. And remember, Normality is highly overrated. Normal people don't change the world. So your ADHD child may be the one that makes the world safe for all of us. Here's hoping. Okay, I'm available at at terrygingrassphd.com. And obviously here. And if you want to leave a message or ask a question or say, man, could you talk about this? Love to hear from you. Okay, we'll catch you next time. And till then, remember why.